Today I'm going to be going over how to use paper stencils, which I did a bunch of cutouts of triangles, on top of this white slip. This piece has already been prepped with the white. It is leather hard, just to give you an idea of the state it's in. And I'm going to use the paper stencils to block out areas. You can also print stencils if you do black and white cutouts, or like a lot of my students have taken really complex stencils with an X-Acto, and you can do really complex pieces. I'm just sticking to triangles today. Sometimes I use polka dots. So this white slip, I'm going to get the paper wet, and then I'm just going to stick it on there. And that's going to block out the white. So when I paint another color on top, it will protect the white slip that's already on here from getting covered by the darker color. Remember, with my slips and in the demos in class, we start with a lighter color and then we work with the darkers on top. You start with the darker colors, sometimes they muddy the lighter colors on top. So I usually go backwards, making sure there's no bubbles. If you don't get them sealed on there all the way, the other color will slide underneath and mar your pattern a little bit. So, but you might want that too. You might want that looseness of design. Okay, so I'm going to take my black and stir it up in your container. Remember, these are from your kits. And I'm going to paint around the stencil. Here. But I usually put a layer on each stencil, and then I'll block out the area or the ring of colorant. Now this piece, because it's a thrown piece and I've defined a rim on it, I can use that rim as a guideline. You can also you can make your own guidelines by carving lines into the piece to mark if you want bands of color, if you want to be more uniform about this. And I can paint this all the way black to the base. I'm just going to leave it like that as a ring. I might straighten that line out at the bottom by just moving the wheel as I turn it for my banding. This is a banding wheel, just like that. So now I have to let this dry a bit before I can take those stencils off. So I'm going to move it to the side and talk about carving, or direct carving. This piece has just a black slip already put on it. It's leather hard also. And I'm just going to do some direct carving on it. So I'm just going to carve back into, and you can see this is already banded the way I threw it on the wheel. And for carving, I use a big pin a lot, and I use the edge of the trimming tool, the corner, one of the 45s. I also use, I have an awl, which is a little short knife with a little tip on it that I can carve into. And sometimes I use pencils. I will hold the piece as I carve, so I will decide what I want to draw on it. So let's say I want a mountain. So I just draw directly onto it. And that goes back into the clay that's underneath. Now, if you're using a white clay, the colors will show up more. I use a soft bristled brush that's clean, just to knock off any burrs that pop up. If you get a lot of burrs, you got to wait till the clay's a little bit drier. This one right now is a little bit soft for this, but I'm going to go with it for the demo. So, and then I'm going to turn it and draw another mountain there. So you can start going and drawing as much as you want or as little as you want. I usually have a soft piece of paper towel, a little paper towel next to me, and then I just turn the tip of the pin on it to keep it clean as I work. Now this tool does a bit of more of a direct line, and by how much pressure you use. So you push really hard, it'll dig in. If you let up gently, it'll make more of a delicate line. So I do a lot of line work that looks like lace or clouds or wind movement with this type of line. So maybe it's kind of a hazy day, and a lot of scraping as I go with it. Then the awl, I hold it actually like a pencil too. I can take off a bigger section with carving by just dragging direct down. And this will cause what's called a scumbling or a chewing up effect. So if you want to look like making plant life or nature or smoke effects. You can directly carve with all the side of it. The tip, you can just dig in and flick, and you can make little dots and create another texture. This type of texture I use a lot for, like, if I'm trying to create a bird surface or a fur surface. And you can see how that affects it. So with carving, you can experiment with different tools, and the key is how soft the clay is. Once the clay dries, the slip especially, sometimes I spritz pieces as I work just to keep the surface moist and wait till it soaks in a little bit so I don't smear my drawing. Then I'll continue direct drawing into the piece. With sgraffito and scratching through slips, you can create really delicate drawings or really direct drawings or really aggressive drawings. It becomes practice and testing things out and trying things. I also use, I should mention this, the brushes for makeup, you know how they're really soft bristled brushes, the little poofy brushes. I use those a lot to clean up my carvings as I go too. So this is a really soft brush that I'm using right now for that. So that's how I think of carving and subtraction into colored slips. You can use all the different colored slips. Now, if I painted multiple layers, you can play around with the other colors that are underneath for the carving. So the paper stencils, I'm not sure how well you'll see it in the camera. I can see where they're at. And I'll take my needle tool and pull at one edge and then peel them off. So you can see the little triangles. And so the stencils, now I have these white triangles in there. I can take my carving tools again. You can always go back in with like this blade. And I like to clean up edges with it and then repaint with a smaller brush, the white back end. That's one of the things I do a lot if I want a lot cleaner line. The other one is sometimes probably this piece probably was a little too wet to stick the paper stencils on, so it's timing, and we'll talk about that in class. And with practice you'll get better at it, just like with me, with practice I get better at doing this too. Now the area that's black, remember there's a white underneath, so if you sgraffito through softly, you can actually add carving to a piece that you put stencils on to bring back the white. So if you're really gentle with the carving and really delicate, you can bring the color that's underneath back out through carving, and you can actually create more of a decoration around your stencils. So you can actually make what's a really basic form really complex with the drawing and the designs that you place on these. Now, the key with this too is, let's say you're really unhappy with this piece when you're all done. You did all the paper stencils, you did your drawing, and you're like, this is horrible, I can't stand this anymore. After it's bizzed, you can put a black glaze or a dark blue glaze, and you'll hide all this. You won't see it. You might see a little bit of a shadow of the line work where the glaze soaks into it. But with a really opaque glaze, you won't see any of your decoration. So later on, you might have a piece that you really don't like. You can just put a thick colored glaze on top and hide everything you did before. But usually people keep their decorations and their designs to give them a history of it. Right now we're working on 2 glazes, which are called Celadon Glazes. And they're glazes that you can see through, but they have a little bit of color. So I'm most likely going to put these 2 pieces, glaze them in a light green or a light blue Celadon. So then this black will still be black, and the white will still be white, but you'll have a light green tone over the whole thing. So it's going to change the color a little bit, rather than a clear. Now, of course, if you want straight color response, just put a clear glaze on it, and you'll see that. I like to use the Celadons just to change the color a little bit. It's almost like, if you've ever seen green bottle glass on soda pop bottles. So I like that layering over these slips and decorations as I do them. Okay, so that's our demo was sgraffito or scratching through or drawing through or carving, and then our was the use of stencils. I used really basic ones today. But I will tell you, I have done really complex ones. The other thing you can do is if you get really into pinstriping, you can get pinstriping tape, and that's really small, less than an eighth of an inch thick, and you can wrap the whole piece with pinstriping tape, then paint the slip on, then peel it all off. And that's something I'll show later on. I have a couple of former students, they do a lot of pinstriping tape because they want lots of pattern on their pieces. So you can get really complex or really simple with this design aspect. Okay, thank you.